What is going on, everybody in Wrestling Review Society? Facebook page, YouTube page, Wrestling Maniacs, Generational Wrestling Society, and WCW Nation. Guys, tonight's a very special night for me. I have an amazing guest for you guys. But right before we get into there, I do want to thank all of our sponsors. First of which being A-Rock Designs. This is my wife's custom business where she makes all those cool wrestling cups you guys see floating around. We do cups, shirts, hoodies, everything like that. So if you want to get any custom merchandise, please feel free to go to A-Rock Designs on Facebook and place your orders there, and we'll definitely take care of you. Also, guys, here on Wrestling Review Society, we are having our 2,000 member giveaway. As of today, when this interview went live, we are sitting at 1647. So once we hit 2,000 members, we will be having another random giveaway. Our last 1,000 member giveaway, we gave away an IWGP United States Championship. So if we have to bump it up from there, you guys can only imagine what the next giveaway is going to be. So with that being said, guys, my guest tonight, we had future plans to kind of let this happen in person. However, with this quarantine going on, we really wanted to come together and provide you guys some kind of distraction, something to take your mind off all the craziness, and my guest was more than willing to help out with that. Guys, he currently has over 243,000 subscribers on YouTube with over 82 million views. He is the winner of four Emmy Awards, guys, two of which being for Best Host and Best Single Sports Story on his amazing story of Greg Iron, a professional wrestler from Cleveland who was born with cerebral palsy. Without any further ado, guys, please help me in welcoming my guest, Mr. Chris Van Vliet. Chris, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you for the wonderful introduction.
The pleasure is all mine. I don't think I kind of hit it as good as Justin Roberts did, but I hope I did you some justice.
Well, no one can do it as good as Justin Roberts. That guy's incredible.
Absolutely. Now, this is a little bit different for you. You're used to being on this side asking the questions. So how you feeling tonight?
Yeah, no, it's always so interesting when I'm the one on the receiving end of the questions, but it's great. Look, these are just conversations at the end of the day. So I'm appreciative that you and I get to have this conversation tonight.
Absolutely. Guys, we are using the platform StreamYard, so if you have any questions you want to send in for Chris or myself, please feel free to send those in, and we'll get to them just as fast as we can. And the message board is already lighting up. Nerds of Wrestling in the house, thank you so much for watching. Stephen Hammer. Stephen Hammer is a good friend of mine. He made all the artwork for the show. He actually posted on Twitter that he hoped we'd be able to do this one day. So, Stephen, thank you for putting that out there in the universe. So Chris, like we were talking before we went live, everybody knows you do a lot of things with professional wrestling, but you also have a life outside of professional wrestling where you cover a multitude of different things. So what got you into broadcasting and journalism?
I mean, that was always something that I wanted to do as a kid. So for those people that just know me from the YouTube interviews or just know me from wrestling interviews, for the last 15 years, I've actually been a TV host, an entertainment reporter, and I've traveled the world interviewing the biggest stars in entertainment. We're talking Tom Cruise and Sandra Bullock and Oprah and Gerard Butler, Will Smith, those types of celebrities and movie stars. And when I was 4 years old, my mom would be able to tell you this story great. I had a Fisher-Price radio, and I would record on like the cassette tapes. I would pretend I was a radio broadcaster, and that's really where it all began. I was emulating my favorite TV broadcasters and radio broadcasters, and then when it came time to do classes in high school, there was a communication studies class that I loved, and I got to be in front of the camera, and I just fell in love with broadcasting, and I thought this is something I've always wanted to do. And I kind of had this epiphany when I was in college that, like, college was fun, right? Like, you're going out with your friends, you were having beers, it's a great time. And then I woke up one day in my senior year and it hit me. I had this epiphany that, oh my God, when this ends, I've got to go to work like for the next 40 to 50 years of my life. And I just didn't want to have a job I hated. I want to have a job that I at least kind of enjoyed. So that's when I started like stacking all the chips in my favor, getting as many volunteer jobs, as many internships as I could, so that I could pad my resume. And then when I graduated, I could take it to a potential employer and go, look, I've got a degree and I've got this experience. And I've been so fortunate ever since I graduated to be able to work in both radio and TV.
Absolutely. And the old saying goes, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life.
That's it. And that, I live by that.
Absolutely. So you tell this story in many of your interviews. When you were in college, you actually did some professional wrestling training. What was that like?
Yeah, so I wanted to be a pro wrestler. Like, that was the thing. And I had this massive passion for broadcasting, but I was also a huge wrestling fan. And when I really started getting into watching wrestling in the late 90s, we're talking the Attitude Era and McMahon and Austin, that was the feud that really got me back into it. I'm like, I want to do this. I want to be a pro wrestler. And of course, we had a backyard wrestling league, because which kids didn't have a backyard wrestling federation in the late 90s? I was Chris Sharp, the champion of the HCW. And I told my friends that when I graduated from high school, when I got a car and when I got into college, I was going to train to be a pro wrestler. And I did. I spent a summer training in Toronto, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And there's, everyone talks about how painful the bumps are running the ropes, which is true, but there's so much technical stuff that goes into training to be a pro wrestler, and footwork and learning so many different holds and things like that that you don't appreciate if you haven't been in there. Yeah. So I did this for a summer, and it was an hour drive each way from my college town, and it was $250 a month, which isn't a ton of money when you have a job, but when you're in college, like $250 is a ton of money.
Yeah.
So it was 4 days a week as well. So I basically had to make a decision. Was I going to finish my college education, or was I going to finish my wrestling school education? Because I couldn't do both at the same time. Something had to give. So I went with the broadcasting degree, the communication studies degree. And I've been really fortunate that I still get to dip my toe in the wrestling world every once in a while. And, I haven't had to take as many bumps.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, much like you said, there's a lot of work that goes into it. And with you trying to focus on your degree and then go to wrestling school, you kind of got to devote yourself to one or the other, because if you go halfway on both, you're going to miss out on both of them.
Yeah, absolutely. There's this phrase that I really like. It says, if you chase two rabbits, you catch none. And I think it's true that if you're trying to spread yourself too thin, if you're trying to head in two different directions, you're not going to be able to succeed at either. I'm happy that I got the training that I did. Every time I'm ring announcing or I'm at an independent show and I'm there early, I like to just kind of climb into the ring and run the ropes a little bit, take a few bumps, but I'm happy with the path that I've gone on. I'm happy that I get to be a ring announcer sometimes. I get to interview some of our favorite wrestlers, some of our heroes that we looked up to. And I get to kind of be on the broadcast side of things too.
Absolutely. Just want to go to a few of the comments just really quick. So Facebook user, by the way, guys, like I said, we are using StreamYard. If you click the link above and grant StreamYard permission to use your name and your photo, it will show up like this, and not Facebook user. So we kind of want to know who we're talking to so we can talk back to you. But Facebook user says, we miss you in Cleveland. Another Facebook user says... Another Facebook user says, yo, you got Chris Van Vliet. He's been more than willing to do this, and I can't thank him enough. He corrected his spelling error right there.
Thank you. Typo. You got caught by the typo.
Just to make you feel better, Chris actually caught one of my typos right before we went live. I spelled Twitter with 2 W's. So it happens to all of us.
That was the special Twitter. The Twitter with 2 W's is the special Twitter.
We also got Hi Chris from Pittsburgh, and also from Australia. Our good buddy Piers Austin is watching from across down under in Australia. So thank you, Piers, for tuning in.
He's living in Tomorrowland. He just woke up there.
Yeah, he actually called me right before this, because as soon as you agreed to do it, I told him about it, and me and him both run similar shows. We both have been very fortunate to interview professional wrestlers on our shows, and we always talk to each other about what's coming up. So he's watching right now, and he's really looking forward to it. So one thing I wanted to ask you about. One of your jobs you had in Cleveland, working for 92.3 The Fan, you actually got to work with Kevin Kiley Sr., the father of Alex Riley. What was that experience like? Because he is literally a radio legend.
He is. Not only did I work with Kevin Kiley Sr. there, I also worked with Vic Travaglianti, better known now as Vic Joseph in the WWE. Mm-hmm. Kevin Kiley Sr. He makes radio look so effortless. So he was hosting a show called Kiley and Booms, which is the morning show. And I got to be a guest host on that many, many times and fill in with them. Thank you guys for, thank you everyone who's commenting on the bottom. This is awesome.
Chris, they love you, man.
This is great, man. This is awesome. But Kevin, Kylie makes wrestling or makes radio look so easy. And it's funny because I was working across the hall at 102.1, which was like a music station. And we would talk on the radio for 15, 20, maybe 30 seconds. And then I would go across the hall to the sports station, and their talk breaks were 10 and 12 and 15 minutes. And I'm like, you guys are like literally talking, 100 times longer than I am. And that takes a great skill to be able to do that. Yes, Alex Riley.
That is the one we're talking about.
His dad is, so Alex Riley's real name is Kevin Kiley. And Kevin Kiley,
he was actually a guest on this show 2 weeks ago.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, we hosted Ken Anderson, Zicky Dice, and Kevin Kiley Jr. or Alex Riley in the last 2 weeks.
Look at you getting all the guests. That's great. Congrats on that.
Thank you. Now, you were saying, I'm sorry for cutting you off.
I was just saying that those sports talk radio guys, I don't know if they get enough credit because they go in for a 3 or a 4 hour show and they just fill it with magic. Talk radio, the guys that do it without taking phone, so Kylie and Booms would do, it's just impressive.
So we have a Facebook comment coming in, and I know who this is. This is my good buddy, Jeff Parthay. He lives in New York, if I can get this to pop up. He asked this question on every interview I do, so I know it's him. What are your thoughts on Hulk Hogan and why he is the greatest professional wrestler of all time?
Well, let me tell you something, brother. Hogan's pretty great. I mean, Hulk Hogan's always been so kind to me whenever we've done an interview. He's definitely the most legendary wrestler of all time. I mean, it's funny how we all have those friends. We all have those neighbors, those relatives who go, oh, yeah, I used to watch wrestling. They don't watch it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to ask just anyone on the street, name 3 wrestlers, Hulk Hogan is always going to be one of those 3 wrestlers that they name.
Absolutely, and more times than not, it's normally, from the experience I found, Hogan, The Rock, and Austin.
Yeah, Hogan, Rock, maybe Undertaker, or like Macho Man or someone like that. Hogan, though, for anyone that knows me, Hogan is one half of the greatest match of all time, in my opinion. My favorite match ever, WrestleMania 18, Rock Hogan. And I was there, too.
So that kind of transitions into my next question for you. What was it that got you into professional wrestling, and how old were you when you discovered pro wrestling?
So this was like late 80s. So I'm 36 years old. I'm as old as WrestleMania. So when I went to WrestleMania 18, I was 18. So the late 80s, we would go to my grandparents' house, and my grandfather would just have it on TV on Saturday night. He wasn't like a massive wrestling fan. It just, happened to be on TV. So that's when I really discovered the larger-than-life characters of that era. Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, the Sergeant Slaughters, Repo Man, like all those different types of characters, Coco Beware. But it was in the late 90s when I really dove in and became the crazy fan that I am and that we all are now. And I was on the high school wrestling team. And I remember my wrestling coach and some of the other people on the team being like, you can't watch that stuff. It's fake. And I'm like, yeah, that's fake. What we doing here is real. And that's kind of how it is when you're an amateur wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a really good friend of mine who loved watching Raw on Monday night. And we talked on the phone a lot. And every single Monday night at 9 o'clock, he'd have to go, I got to let you go. Raw's about to start.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually one time I said, you know what, I'll stay on the phone with you. We can watch this together. And I'm like, yeah, this is pretty cool. This isn't so bad. And I don't know what it was, but I just instantly fell in love, and I was all in on it. And I completely fell in love with it. I would watch Raw and switch to Nitro during commercial breaks. I watched SmackDown, Thunder, ECW is Friday night. I watched Metal, Jacked. I watched Sunday Night Heat, and I taped them all. So if there wasn't something to watch, I would watch it again on VHS.
Very nice. So we have two questions coming in that kind of coincide with each other. So I'm going to show one and kind of hint at the other. This one says, Chris, do you collect wrestling figures or belts or anything wrestling related? We obviously see some belts and boots behind you. Is that the extent of your collection, or do you collect other things wrestling related?
I don't have a huge collection here, but what we have is 4 belts on display. We've got the current WWE Championship, ECW Championship, signed by Rob Van Dam. We got the Winged Eagle, signed by Hulk Hogan, brother. And below that, we've got the tag team title, not signed. I've also got, this probably shouldn't be on the floor, but it is. After I interviewed Goldberg, he actually gave me this.
Wow.
And he signed it and said, "You're next."
That is an awesome gift to have.
To the extent, yeah. And then I got the that's a boot. That's a Ric Flair boot and Rey Mysterio mask. Not worn by Ric Flair or Rey Mysterio, just something that I've had for a long time. And Flair autographed that boot. So that's kind of the extent of my collection. Of this, I'm actually over my left shoulder here on your right. That's a photo of me and The Rock, and he autographed that magazine cover because The Rock's my favorite wrestler of all time and has been my favorite interview of all time.
And I guess we're just going to ignore the big silver YouTube plaque underneath it.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Well, thank you.
You're too modest. You're too modest, Chris.
One of the Emmys up here too.
Yeah. Just while we're talking about belts, we are in a few different collectors' pages, mine included, where we love to show off our collections. And I have something here that I'd like to show you because, as I've said, I've watched a lot of your interviews, and you were actually one of the very first people to get to see this when you interviewed Cody Rhodes. But here we have the AEW Championship.
Wow, that's beautiful. Very nice.
What was it like being able to...
That was really cool. I did that interview with Cody 3 days before Double or Nothing last May. And he was getting all these texts before we started the interview. And after the interview, he goes, oh, man, I got to respond to all these texts. This is actually a belt designer. Do you want to see what it looks like? And I'm like, yes. So he swiped through and showed me photos of the AEW World Heavyweight Championship 3 or 4 days before the rest of the world saw it.
That was a great interview, and I remember that interview like it was yesterday. He actually lost his phone in the couch that you guys were sitting on. And what was it like being able to sit down with Cody just before Double or Nothing happened? When we're on the brink of changing wrestling forever, or at least for now, what was it like being able to sit down with him and talk about all that stuff?
It was cool being on the cusp of it because, if we take this back, and it's hard to remember now a world without AEW because it's been so much a part of our, life and our culture now for the last but there was so much buzz going into Double or Nothing. It was basically 4 months of buzz. And to be able to sit down with Cody and have him basically tell me about what was going to be happening was exciting. And and I also said this to him during the interview. It was just the time. It was almost 3 years to the day that he left WWE. So crazy to at that time, 3 years now, almost 4 years. And it was also the week where Brock Lesnar had won the Money in the Bank, and fans obviously hated that. And
the match that he was never in.
Yes. And it was also the week where Mick Foley unveiled the 24/7 championship to the reception that it got. So pretty amazing that 5 and 6 days later, AEW came in, with a bang and kind of shook things up.
I really can't. I can't snicker too much at the 24/7 title. I have a pretty good belt collection myself. I think I'm up to about 34 here in the house, and there are 2 different 24/7 championships in my collection. Me and my friends, we love shooting videos with them and stuff like that. It just makes for a really good time. But one of the questions I was going to ask you before we got into your pro wrestling interviews, something I found very, very interesting about you was in 2011, you were Cosmo's Bachelor of the Year, and you donated your $10,000 prize to the Boys and Girls Club. Why did that mean so much to you to do that?
I was working in Cleveland, and I was nominated by, from Cosmopolitan magazine for this Bachelor of the Year contest. And it was so wild. They picked one person from every single state. And I was the representative from Ohio because I was living in Cleveland at the time. And I said, if I win this thing, it's a long shot. There's 50 states and Puerto Rico, so 51 possible winners. I said, if by some off chance I win this thing, I'm going to donate the money to the Boys and Girls Club of Cleveland. And we did a lot of work with them at the TV station that I was working for. And I said, even if I don't win, we're going to hold a charity event and we're going to donate all the proceeds from that to the Boys and Girls Club of Cleveland. So somehow I won. Somehow I won. I was Cosmopolitan's Bachelor of the Year, the shirtless beach photo and all. And I got the $10,000 and I gave that and donated that to the Boys and Girls Club. And it just meant so much to be able to see the smiles in those kids' faces and to know what that means to them. Like, that money goes so much further for them than it could possibly go for me or you.
Absolutely. And on behalf of myself and everybody watching, Chris, thank you so much for being the type of person that you are. Not just that, but, taking the time to answer guys' messages and emails like me and just really supporting the DIY guys. Thank you so much for just being who you are, man. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, well, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, we're all humans, right? We're all in this together, and especially in wrestling. We're all fans in this together. I'm no different than you are. And the fact that if I can support you and you can support me, then everybody wins.
Absolutely. One other thing I wanted to ask you about before we got into wrestling. I like to do my homework on people when I have them on here, so I kind of know what questions to ask. You seem to have a love for fishing, and you actually won a fishing tournament. Where did your love for fishing come from?
I've been fishing my whole life, and that's one of my other great passions. I love fishing so much, in fact, that I'm a co-owner in a fishing brand. It's called Woo Tungsten. You can look this up. That's the correct way to pronounce it. It's spelled WOO !tungsten, but it's pronounced Woo Tungsten. And I've been fishing my whole life since I was 4 years old. Went up to a cottage that our neighbors owned, and they basically stuck me out on a dock with a plastic fishing rod, a bobber and a worm. I caught my first ever fish, which was a rock bass. And pardon the pun, I was hooked ever since.
You took the pun right out of my mouth, and I was just about to say that.
And there was a point in time, like when I was in high school and certainly into college, where I was fishing in bass tournaments pretty much every weekend. I'm from the Toronto area, so in the lakes around Toronto and Ontario, but also like upstate New York. Fished in some in Ohio on Lake Erie, Lake Champlain, and it's just been something that I've always loved and always will love. It's just the older I get, the more time I realize that fishing takes up, and it's tough to set aside an entire weekend to go fishing. Although when I was living in Miami, I was very close to Lake Okeechobee, which, if there's any bass fishermen watching this right now, it's one of the best largemouth bass fishing lakes in the world. So it was a treat to live next to that and hook up my boat to my pickup truck and drive up to the lake and catch bass.
Another thing is, no matter how big and successful you've become, family has always been really important to you, to the point where you and your father have this tradition where every year you go to a different baseball stadium and watch a game. When did you guys start that tradition? And to this point, what's your favorite baseball stadium you've been to?
Wow, the fact that you know this, Kevin, you did your research. Thank you.
I tried to.
This started in the year 2000, kind of by accident. This ties right into the fishing we were just talking about. The Bassmaster Classic is like the Super Bowl of fishing. And they were having this in Chicago. So I said to my dad, oh my God, do you think we'd be able to go to this? Chicago's not that far of a drive from Toronto, not that far of a flight. And he said, sure, we can go to the Bassmaster Classic, but while we're there, we got to go to Wrigley Field. I said, sure. I played baseball from age 4 until 22. I love baseball's another thing I spent a lot of time doing. In fact, there was one year where I had to decide, was I going to play baseball or was I going to fish in tournaments? And I actually ended up deciding to fish in the tournaments. So my dad and I started the tradition that year. It's gone strong every year, and we've gone to at least one every year. I think we've done 22 stadiums. And Wrigley's up there as... That's my dad's favorite.
That was one of your dad's favorite.
My favorite's Fenway.
Yeah, I think your dad said it was a tie between Wrigley and Fenway.
Yes, you saw this was
the Sammy Guevara interview. Yep.
Yes.
I told you, man, I try to do as much homework as I can, just so it helps the conversation flow. And one of the things that you said really stuck out to me when I started doing this. And you always said, try to make it more of a conversation and not like an interview. And I'm not quite there yet. I'm still working on it, but I think I've gotten a lot better. A guy that you recently interviewed, Vampiro, really helped me out with it. And to be completely honest, I forgot the camera was on, and we were just talking, and it was a great time. It was so fun.
Those have always been my favorite style of interview, and I just the second I stopped thinking about interviews as interviews and just like we're hanging out. Like if you and I were to go out tonight and grab a beer, if bars were still open,
if we were allowed.
If we could go and grab a beer somewhere, we wouldn't be like, oh my God, okay, what should I ask him next after he's done answering this question? You would just have a conversation. And I think that too many people get caught up in that term. Oh, it's an interview. No, it's just two people exchanging information.
So my very first interview, the first person to give me a chance was Dave Christ of OVE. And we both came from Ohio. That's where I'm originally born from. And then I moved to Georgia. But my second one was the current heavyweight champion, Nick Aldis. And my nerves were through the roof, and everybody came back and told me, like, dude, the questions were great, but you need to relax. And my wife has helped me so much with it. Well, and when I finally go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you're doing a great job. You've relaxed. You're doing awesome.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. When I was able to do that, I find it more enjoyable. Do you still get nervous to this day, or have the nerves just gone away?
I don't think I really get nervous so much as like there's definitely an excitement. Like especially if I find out some sort of information about someone that they haven't talked about before. I get excited about being able to like ask them the questions that maybe we'll get an answer that we've never heard before. The only time I really get nervous is before I've interviewed The Rock. And I've interviewed The Rock 9 times, not that I'm counting or anything. But, The Rock meant so much to me when I was growing up, and he was my favorite wrestler. He's been now my favorite interview. It's my favorite match of all time. And The Rock's just such a great person. He's kind and he's charismatic. He's funny. And he has this star quality where he makes it about you. And every time I'm about to interview The Rock, I just get a little bit nervous because A, he meant so much to me, and B, I know how big of an interview it is, especially for my YouTube channel. So that just kind of runs through my mind. And then as soon as I, shake his hand, I'm like, oh yeah, it's Dwayne. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's just Dwayne. I mean, who's really counting? It's just Dwayne.
It's just the most famous person in the world.
So now we're going to go ahead and transition into some of the pro wrestling interviews that I personally love. Guys, if you have any interviews that you've seen of Chris's that you would like to ask about, go ahead and flood the comment section. Let's knock them all out, guys. The thing I really enjoy about your interviews, Chris, is you shed a light on who the person really is, not the gimmick, but the person. And it really allows us to see who these people really are. And one of the questions we have here from Facebook user is, who was your favorite interview? Now, I know that's a huge list, so I just want to change this question a little bit. What are some of the interviews that really stand out to you?
I mean, The Rock's definitely up there. Like I will say, The Rock's been my favorite interview, not just wrestling, but just interview-wise. He's been my favorite interview, and he's always so giving in all of his interviews. So that's something I've really appreciated about him. I think there's been some that have just been like, I know this is going to be a good interview, and then when it's done, I've been surprised about how great that interview was. And I think that The Big Show's a great example of that. I interviewed him like 3-ish years ago, and it has almost 4 million views on YouTube. He's just such a great guy, a gentle giant. Of course, Dolph Ziggler's always an amazing interview, and Nick's become a friend of mine and someone who I've interviewed countless times. So it's always a good time with Dolph Ziggler. The Miz, I've done a bunch of interviews with him, and I love how The Miz brings it every time. The Miz is just so full of charisma. The Miz knows that when the camera turns on, you got to turn on. And I really appreciate that about him.
A comment from Isaac Brown says, I love the Simon Miller interview. You both seem like mates and have a conversation.
I was just texting with Simon Miller. I love that guy. And he is someone not unlike me who had the dream of wanting to be a pro wrestler. And now he's actually doing it. And I think I might be completely wrong on this, but I'm close. He's 33, I think, when he started training. Now he's been in the ring wrestling for about a year, I think now. So not only is he so nice and so positive, he's incredible with what he does with What Culture, but he's now carving out quite a niche for himself in the wrestling world.
Absolutely. Stephen Hammer, I want you to know I do see your question, but that is one I do want to say for just a little bit later, so I'm not ignoring you, bud. We are going to get to that. We are going to get to that. Just sit tight real quick, buddy. We got a few other things to get to first. With that being said, another question from my buddy Piers Austin, who runs a very similar show. If you guys haven't seen it, Multi-Continental Wrestling Alliance from Australia. The guys are great. They're doing amazing work over there. Says, Chris, thank you for supporting little guys and giving your time to do this great show.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for giving up your time to, A, watch this show, and you, Kevin, to host this show. So
thank you.
Thanks all around.
You know, one of my favorite interviews from you to this day, one, because I'm such a huge fan of him, and two, I don't think we really knew the story of him until he sat down with you, was the Darby Allin interview. That interview was absolutely one of my favorites.
Yeah, and I was fortunate to work with Darby Allin on some independent promotions. I worked with him in Deerfield Beach, Florida, where I'm the ring announcer at Blueprint Pro Wrestling. And Darby's a really interesting guy. And you definitely don't get a sense of who he really is from just what you see in the ring. Like, he's a layered guy with so much going on. And I was just honored to be able to sit down and have that conversation with him. And then, you know, all the different things he shared about basically living in a car like he was homeless and he was
cooking chicken in the gym. Yeah, the voices were amazing.
The fact that he was on what was
Sex Sent Me to the ER, Killer Bees.
He was on the TLC show Sex Sent Me to the ER. So there's a lot to Darby Allin. He's still very young with a ton of potential, and I wouldn't be surprised if you and me are sitting here in 3 or 4 or 5 years and Darby Allin is the AEW champion.
I kid you not, Chris. This is 100% true story. When I ordered my AEW championship, I ordered a Darby Allin nameplate, and that's the nameplate that was on it. I took it off to clean the dust off, and it fell behind my dresser. It literally just happened like an hour before you came on. But Darby Allin's nameplate has been on my AEW championship because I 100% believe that. Getting into another Facebook user question, and I asked you this. I know you meet a lot of people. You're always on the road. So if you don't remember, I'm not offended by it. But we actually met at Fight for the Fallen in Jacksonville, right here.
I remember.
Because the only thing you asked was, can I hold the title?
Well, I was like, you know, we're going to take this photo together. I want to hold it. I was actually with my girlfriend. That was her first ever AEW event. Actually, that was her first ever wrestling event.
And you were so nice to me and my wife, and you were more than happy to take pictures. But the reason I bring that up is I asked you one question while we were taking that picture, and we actually have a Facebook user comment about Mr. MJF. So one question for everybody watching. How good was MJF's omelet?
Oh, wow. That omelet was surprisingly good. And to Facebook user here, MJF doesn't play a gimmick. MJF is MJF. That's just who he is. So it's not a gimmick. It's just MJF is a mean, not nice person, and they just happen to stick a TV camera on him every Wednesday.
So now I want to get to the comment from Stephen Hammer. One of your most recent interviews was the David Benoit, and it was intense. Now my question for you is, to my knowledge, and I think you guys hit on this in the interview, he actually reached out to you, and this was the first time he actually talked about it. Out of respect for him, I don't want to ask any questions about the interview itself, but for you as the interviewer, did you find it hard to go through with that interview, and what was the feeling in the room as you're going through with that interview?
So the biggest thing that, you know, is not really seen on camera here is, so I flew into Las Vegas for this interview, and he was there for a week on vacation with one of his friends. And we had been following each other on Instagram for a while, and we'd sent a few messages back and forth, and he sent me a message and said, would you ever want to do an interview with me? And I'm like, yeah, of course. Like, if you're willing to do an interview, I will fly to wherever, we'll make this happen. So we did. We had the interview scheduled on a Friday morning, and I flew into Las Vegas on a Thursday evening. And as I landed, I just sent him a text and said, "Hey man, I just landed. If you don't have any plans tonight, like, let's grab a drink. Let's hang out." And he's like, "Oh, sure, sounds good. Like, I'll meet you at your hotel." And that was what really broke the ice. So we spent that Thursday night together, me, him, and his buddy, and we had drinks. We walked around the casinos. We grabbed some food. The next day, we grabbed food again together, and we're friends. And this is what made it so much easier. If I had just knocked on his door and said, "Hey, I'm Chris. Nice to meet you. Let's sit down and talk about what happened 13 years ago," it would have been a really difficult situation. So the fact that we were able to, kind of break the ice with each other, have a drink, just chat about other stuff. And it was that Thursday night, we were just talking about wrestling at the bar. And he said, "You're free to talk about anything tomorrow." And I said, "Are you sure?" He's like, "Ask me anything, bro." And I said, "I can, are you sure? Like, we can talk about your dad?" He's like, "Of course. My dad's my hero. What happened, but ask me anything. Nothing's off limits." And I'm like, okay, wow. So the fact that we were able to get that out of the way the day before, I think made the situation a lot easier.
And second part to that question is, for the first person he reached out to and really wanted to tell the story, how did it feel for you being that person that he felt so comfortable with to really share that story for the first time?
I was honored because it's a big story. It's not just a wrestling story, as we've learned with Dark Side of the Ring, airing yesterday.
Amazing show.
Worldwide news story. Yeah, that was such a great episode. And I was just honored that he not only reached out to me, but beyond that, he trusted me. And the fact that he trusted me with this story that was obviously so personal to him, and it was something that was built up in him, that he thanked me afterwards. He said, "I thank you. I really need to get that off my chest." It meant a lot to me. I mean, he's good friends with Chris Jericho, and he could have easily said to Chris Jericho, like, "I want to," and for whatever reason, do it. So I'm eternally grateful for that opportunity.
Chris, you made that, and like you said, you guys had that night before to really break the ice, but you made that interview seem so seamless, and you conducted yourself in such a professional manner. And I think that's one of the reasons, like, we all love watching your show, is you conduct yourself as such a professional. And like I said, you really help us understand who these wrestlers are as people, not just the gimmick.
Well, thank you for saying that. And I'm fully aware that even though the channel has my name on it, my YouTube channel has my name on it, no one's coming to my channel to see me. Like, if I just talked for an hour, like, maybe my mom and my girlfriend would watch it. But, I understand that this is a very guest-driven show, and people are checking out my interviews because of who I'm sitting down with. So I want to hold that mirror up. I'm a fan just like everybody that's watching these interviews, and I want to hold that mirror up and go, if another fan was sitting in this seat right now, what would they want to know? Or what's something we don't know about this person that we can maybe find out over the next hour?
Absolutely. Now, I want to talk to you as Chris the wrestling fan. One of the major topics breaking this past week was that WrestleMania is now going to be a 2-night pre-taped event. As a wrestling fan, do you think this was a smart idea, or do you think it should have been postponed?
I'm back. Don't worry.
I got you. Were you able to hear the question?
I only heard the first part. We both cut out there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think it's like with this coronavirus and everybody working from home, my internet's been super slow. But the question was, with WrestleMania recently coming out as a 2-part pre-taped event, do you think this was the right way to go, or should it have been postponed for a later date?
Look, I'm just happy that wrestling is still happening. There's so many things in our world right now that are postponed or canceled, and I love that this gives us a semblance of normality in our lives right now. Is it going to look like the WrestleMania that we've seen the previous 35 years? Of course not. But the fact that this is still continuing on and giving us this little glimmer of hope that things are still kind of normal in our world when we can't go to our favorite restaurants. Most of us can't go to our workplace. You know, you can't go to a baseball game or a hockey game or
to the
a
gym.
basketball game. Right. Can't go to the gym. Can't have gatherings, can't go to concerts. Obviously, the list can go on and on and on and on. The fact that this is still existing and they're not just showing us replays, I think just is a nice glimmer of hope to remind us that things are normal. I have a feeling that somewhere down the line, when things are back to normal, they'll have some sort of huge show to kind of make up for this. Of course, it won't be WrestleMania. And, you know, this is everything that happens this year is going to have an asterisk next to it. But I appreciate that this is still going on.
You know, I recently talked about this with a bunch of my friends, and the silver lining I was able to take from it is, like, very much like you said, it's still happening. We're still getting to see wrestling as fans. But what I really think is good for the performers, and obviously you've spent more time around them than I have, but with people going into their first WrestleMania, I think this eases the nerves a little bit for them, and in turn will give a better match. Not to say they're not world-class athletes, because they are, but when you take away those nerves of WrestleMania, I think it's going to lead to much, much better matches.
I think that yes and no, because the crowd also then makes, you know, it raises that adrenaline level, and I think it can make matches that much better. I mean, I talk about Rock Hogan being my favorite match of all time. Rock Hogan without a crowd wouldn't be that exciting of a match. The crowd is what made that match so exciting. So I think that there's definitely a lot of pros here, and there's definitely a lot of cons here, but I like to be the eternal optimist, and I would much rather look at the pros that are going on, the positive things.
Absolutely. And like you said, it's just good that we still have wrestling. So right before we get into one of our final segments of the interview, I just want to take a quick minute to let everybody know what's going on here. As most of you know, my guest tonight is the 4-time Emmy winner, Chris Van Vliet. If you don't know who he is, you've obviously lived under a rock. However, if you want to find out more about him, all of his links to his Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter are posted in the description. Feel free to go check it out. Also, here on Wrestling Review Society, we are having our 2,000 member giveaway, where once we hit 2,000 members, we're doing a complete random draw, and that lucky winner will win a bunch of cool prizes. However, for tonight only, as a special treat and thank you to Mr. Chris Van Vliet for joining us, if you go subscribe to Chris Van Vliet on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, whatever the case may be, and send me a screenshot of it, I will give you an extra entry into that random giveaway. So now you have 2 chances to win.
Thank you.
Also,
wow.
A huge thank you. Absolutely. Also, the best part for you, Chris, is coming right now. Also, one of our huge sponsors is A-Rock Designs, who makes all those cool custom cups you guys see floating around. If you want to get your hands on anything like that, feel free to message myself or my wife, Ashley Rodriguez, and we're more than happy to take your orders. With that being said, Chris, my wife took it upon herself to start making a personal gift for my guests as a thank you for being on the show. And this is one of a kind. Only Chris Van Vliet will own this one. But this, sir, is your personal coffee tumbler saying vague goals, get vague results. Chris Van Vliet, handmade by my wife.
That's incredible. Wow. Well, thank you. What a thoughtful gift. That's incredible. I'm one of a kind, too.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Wow.
This will keep your hot drinks hot, your cold drinks cold, perfect all year around.
I love it, man. What's your wife's name?
My wife's name is Ashley Rodriguez.
Ashley, thank you so much. Wow.
I'm glad you like it. And so, guys, that takes care of our sponsors. Oh, I forgot one. I apologize. Mayon Belts. He is the guy who makes all of my personal championships. If you want to get anything, right now they do have Belts of the Month where it is 25% off. Go to see Eddie and Ira Williams at Mayon Belts to place all your customizable belt orders. All right, Chris, this is my favorite part of the show. This is the only reoccurring segment we have here in the War Room, and I like to call it the Insta Game. Basically, what I do is I take a close look at your Instagram. I snag a few pictures that I think are interesting, and I get your take on these pictures. Are you down for that?
Let's do it. Oh my God, what a cool
All right. So we're going to start off on a really good note. Right here. As I've said, you are a 4-time Emmy winner. What is it like? What is the experience like when you win your first, your second, your third? What's going through your head when you win these prestigious awards?
Well, you dug deep with this one. This is back to 2012 when I actually did win my first and second in the same night, and it meant so much to me. I moved to the United States from Canada in 2010, and I was actually working under a work visa, and I was trying to get a green card. I know this sounds like it has nothing to do with that. I said to my immigration attorney, I said, "How can I get a green card?" He said, "It's really going to come down to like, what awards have you won? What magazines have you been in, all that kind of stuff." And I said, "Well, I've been nominated for an Emmy Award." He's like, "Nomination, that's okay." And I said, "Well, I'm up for like 2 more Emmys in like 3 months." He says, "If you win those, you'll have a much better chance of getting your green card." So when I won my first Emmy Award, I remember being like, "Oh my God, like not only did I win an Emmy, but now I also like can apply," which I did. And now I've been able to live here. I've been here for 10 years now. So that meant a lot. That's the pinnacle of what we did in local news. And yeah, to be able to have that, it's one of them on my shelf there. It means a lot.
Absolutely, and I can't say this enough, but congratulations, man! It's extremely well deserved. One thing that I thought was very funny, and you had numerous pictures like this on your Instagram. How does one person get a 22-cent check?
I've done a little bit of acting. Acting's another thing that I really enjoy doing, and that I can't remember which specific movie that was, but I played a news reporter in a few movies when I lived in Cleveland. One was Criminal Activities, a movie with John Travolta. I was also in a movie called The Bronze with Sebastian Stan, and I was in another movie called Love Finds You in Sugar Creek, and I played a reporter or a news anchor in all of them. So you get paid the like daily rate from being in the acting union, and that gets sent to your agent, and you get the money afterwards. And then every 2-ish, 3-ish, 4-ish months, depending on where this gets picked up on video demand, or maybe it's on an airplane, or some sort of new country is going to air your movie on TV, you get the residuals. And since I had like a line in this movie, my residual is rather low. So I post the funny ones. I post the 22 cent and the 68 cents, but I also do get residuals for like, I think I got one recently for like $11 or something.
Big time, huh?
Oh yeah.
Don't spend it all in one place, Chris. So you might have actually hit on this next picture. Is this from one of the movies?
Oh, I wish it was. No, put that back up. That's real life. I wish that was from a movie. That was me covering Hurricane Irma on Hollywood Beach in Florida and working as an entertainment reporter in Miami. When a hurricane comes through, it's all hands on deck. And whether you're the weather guy or you're the sports guy or you're like me and you're the entertainment guy, you're going to be out there covering the hurricanes. So that hurricane hit South Florida like in the middle of the night. So I worked 20 hours, I believe, that day.
Very nice.
Standing out there in the 100-mile-an-hour winds, and yeah,
definitely paying your dues.
That was one of a kind experience, that's for sure.
So we just have a few more, and we're getting to some really funny ones. But before we do, I really found this one interesting. What's going on here?
Oh, that's me in Prime Wrestling in Cleveland, Ohio, delivering the rock bottom to Nick.
Hey, very good rock bottom, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you. That's on my YouTube channel if anyone wants to check it out. Yeah, I had a little mini feud. I was a ring announcer in Prime Wrestling, and I had a little feud with Nikki Valentino, which all culminated at Wrestlution, which was like their WrestleMania, if you will. And I had a wrestler named Josh Prohibition that was representing me, wrestling Nikki Valentino. And then at the end, Nikki got in my face, and I'd deliver a move to him.
I mean, the rest is history. So I was looking through these photos with my wife, and my wife's father was a fisherman, and she was telling me about because I'll be honest, don't hate me for this, I don't have the patience for fishing. I never have. I've tried to get into it, but I never really could. But what does one have to do to get this monster?
Yeah, it's a 480-pound Goliath grouper.
480.
We filmed this for a TV segment, actually. The segment was called Keeping Up with Chris, and I got to do all kinds of fun things like swim with alligators and catch that Goliath grouper. And because they're such a big, strong fish, you don't use a fishing rod. We used a rope with a giant hook the size of your hand and a big bait, and just put it on the bottom. And when that fish hit, it was like literal tug of war with a beast.
Now, I hear all these stories of I had to fight this thing for close to an hour, 2 hours, whatever the case may be. How long was that fight for with that giant fish?
So if we had a rod and reel, that probably would have been an hour or something. Because we had like the rope and we're like pulling it up with this, literally an anchor rope, it took only like 2 minutes.
Oh, okay.
But it was like running and like the rope is slipping through your hands. So I had rope burn on my hands. But when he finally came up, this is a protected species in Florida, so that's the reason I'm in the water with it. You're actually not allowed to take them out of the water. You're not allowed to harvest them or keep them or kill them. So I went in the water to help with the release, to take that photo. And that beast is still swimming around out there. So I got to go catch this thing when it's 100 pounds heavier.
100 pounds heavier. More power to you. I can't wait to see pictures. Now, getting into the two that I thought were the absolute best and funniest. Chris, what's going on here?
Oh, wow. That was also part of the Keeping Up with Chris segment. I have mermaid classes in South Florida. And I wanted to become their first ever merman. So
mermaid classes.
On the tail, and I tried to. It's very difficult to swim because your feet are like crammed together in that tail, and you're flipping it kind of like this. But it made for hilarious television, and that's really all that matters.
Well, and one thing I'd like to point out, there are a bunch of mermaids in the background, so you might just been in the right spot. Maybe it was just a smart move. That's why guys take home ec in high school. So
you're right.
So getting to the last one now, obviously as an avid viewer of your show, I know what's going on here, but I really want you to walk us through the process of how this picture came to be.
So Sean Spears and Tyler Breeze own a wrestling school in Central Florida, in Apopka, Florida, called Flatbacks. And Sean, they're both fellow Canadians, and Sean Spears has been, so kind to me ever since I did that interview with him right after he was released from WWE, but before he had signed with AEW. And he talked about opening this wrestling school, and I said, I'd love to come in. I'd love to take some bumps in there. I'd love to run the ropes, and, we'll put your wrestling school over. So that was the plan. I did an interview with Spears. I did an interview with Breeze. And then after those interviews, I went in the ring, and I took some bumps. I ran the ropes a little bit. I locked it up with Sean Spears. And Spears goes, I'm going to give you a chop. This is off camera. He goes, I'm going to give you a chop on camera. I'm like, one chop? Yeah, sure. But I think what would be more entertaining is if you just lined up all your students and, they all gave me a chop. I think that'd be a more entertaining segment. Little did I know that when their students give chops, they each give 2 chops. Mm-hmm. So there was 8 students and 2 teachers. So you can do the math. That was 20 chops. And after like the 3rd one, I had handprints all over my chest. And by like the 7th one, I don't really think I could feel it anymore. And the welts were building up, the bruising, the redness, and my chest stayed bruised for like 6 days. I
have to say, they all looked incredibly painful. The fix is in, guys. Wrestling is predetermined. Some of the moves are choreographed. We get it. But there's no way to fake a chop. And Tyler Breeze's first chop across your chest sounded like a shotgun went off.
He was even surprised. Chopper. And then he delivers this, the best chop he's ever given, I think. And that was, and I felt kind of bad because Spears gives a great chop. And at the end of it, Spears is like, well, which one was the hardest one? And I'm like, it was actually Tyler Breeze.
Oh, that's awesome. So just want to get 2 more final questions for you coming in from the audience. One being, as a lifelong wrestling fan, what are some of your favorite belt designs?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that WWE has done a great job with the Winged Eagle. What would you call the one after the Winged Eagle? The circular...
The Big Eagle. The Big Eagle.
Big Eagle. Those are probably my favorites, mostly because that was what I grew up on too. You know, those were the belts that I grew up on and I loved. But I'm gonna go really far into left field here. A belt that I really like is the Lucha Underground Championship. I think that belt was really well designed and very interestingly designed. And obviously Lucha didn't stay around for that long, but that's a great belt.
I'm glad you bring that up because when they brought out the first one that Prince Puma held, I was like, that cannot be their championship. And then just to find out they had a story where that one would be ripped in half, the second one was absolutely amazing. And I personally think the Gift of the Gods was an amazing concept for a belt with the coins that locked into it. Yeah. Thought that was absolutely amazing. And one other thing, we do have a shout out. Nerds of Wrestling on Facebook is an amazing page. I'm a proud member of it. If any of you watching like to go talk about wrestling and be involved with wrestling, Nerds of Wrestling is definitely the place to be. Chris, I cannot thank you enough for setting aside the time to do this. Before we get off here, please allow everyone to know where they can follow you, find you, and keep up with everything you have going on in your life.
Well, I want to thank you, Kevin, for taking the time, for inviting me to come on here. This has been a great chat. You do great stuff, so thank you. And anyone can find me. It's just my name. There's my name right there. It's on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube. And if you've ever seen one of my interviews and you haven't subscribed yet, please take like 3 seconds today to just click on there.
And just remember, guys, if you subscribe to Chris Van Vliet today and send me a screenshot of it, you will get an extra slot in that 2,000 member giveaway. Thank you to all of our sponsors. Thank you to Chris Van Vliet. And remember, if you want to get your hands on any custom merchandise like the Vague Goals Get Vague Results Cup going to Mr. Chris Van Vliet, handmade by A-Rock Designs, feel free to hit up A-Rock Designs on Facebook, and we'll take care of all of your orders. Chris, I can say thank you now until 6 o'clock in the morning, and it's not going to be enough. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing every show you have coming up.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much. We've got the live Q&As all week on my YouTube channel, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 10 a.m. Pacific. If anyone's watching the UK, it's 5 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Tomorrow's Lillian Garcia. Friday's Ken Shamrock. And Saturday is none other than Barbie Blank, a.k.a. Kelly Kelly. So thank you to everyone who has been joining me on those, and we look forward to doing a few more of these. Absolutely. Guys, we'll see you next time. Chris, if I can just ask you for 1 more minute of your time after the live feed ends, I'd really appreciate that. Guys, I will be back. Update. This is the final War Room interview on Wednesday nights. We are moving to Thursday night due to my work commitments. So Thursday, we'll have another amazing guest for you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for sending those comments. See you guys next time.